As Moses begins to wrap up his instructions to the children of Israel before they go into the Promised Land, he spoke the words of a song which we now call the Song of Moses. Deuteronomy 31, verse 30 through 32, verse 1. Then Moses spoke in the hearing of all the assembly of Israel the words of this song until they were ended. Give ear, O heavens, and I will speak, and hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. Moses called on the heavens and the earth to hear and to witness the words of this song. The heavens and the earth are nearly an eternal witness. They were the first things that God created, and they will endure until God recreates the heavens and the earth. What does the Song of Moses contain that is so important that it requires the witness of the heavens and the earth? What does it tell us about God's plan for His people? And how does it point to Yeshua? I'm Dan Cathcart, and this is Shadows of the Messiah. Let's set the scene. Moses gathered all the children of Israel to speak these words. The entire assembly of Israel was able to hear what he spoke. The heavens and the earth were to hear all of Moses' words and be witness to them. It is as if the children of Israel are gathered at the throne of God to hear these words. Look at Psalms 50, verses 4 through 6. And he shall call to the heavens from above, and to the earth, that he may judge his people. Gather my saints together to me, those who have made a covenant with me by sacrifice. Let the heavens declare his righteousness, for God himself is judge. Then Moses spoke these words as a song, so the children of Israel would remember them. And we all know that setting something to a song is a great tool for remembering. We've all learned the alphabet through a song, and some of us learned the books of the Bible through a song. The Shema is recited to a song, as many other Jewish prayers are. God told Moses to write it this way for that purpose. Look at Deuteronomy 31, verse 19. Now therefore write down this song for yourselves, and teach it to the children of Israel. Put it in their mouths, that this song may be a witness for me against the children of Israel. So Moses wrote this song, taught it to the children of Israel, and spoke it to them. He spoke it until he came to the end of the song. The word ended in Deuteronomy 31:30 is number 8552, tamam, meaning complete, accomplish, or perfect. Moses spoke the words of this song until they were complete, accomplished, and perfect. There was no more to add. Everything that was necessary was included in the song. Moses called on the heavens and the earth to hear his words that were to fall as drops of rain from heaven to earth. Deuteronomy 32, verse 2. Let my teaching drop as rain, my speech distill as dew, as raindrops on the tender herb, and as a shower on the grass. This teaching was not a pounding thunderstorm. It was a gentle rain that nourished and didn't harm the tender herb. It was the welcome dew that provided just enough moisture to quench the thirst of the grass. The first of Moses' instructions or teachings was to proclaim the name, majesty, and authority of God. Moses calls God the rock a total of 5 times in this song. Deuteronomy 32, verses 3 and 4. For I proclaim the name of the Lord, ascribe greatness to our God. He is the rock. His work is perfect, for all his ways are justice, a God of truth and without injustice. Righteous and upright is he. In contrast to the righteousness of God, Moses speaks prophetically of a time when the children of Israel would be rejected by God because they rejected him. Deuteronomy 32, verses 5 through 6. They have corrupted themselves. They are not his children because of their blemish, a perverse and crooked generation. Do you thus deal with the Lord, O foolish and unwise people? Is he not your father who bought you? Has he not made you and established you? Although God bought them, in verse 15, Moses tells the children of Israel that he is the rock of their salvation, which they have scorned. Moses calls Israel Jeshurun, which means the righteous one. It is appropriate that the righteous one should have righteous followers. Deuteronomy 32, verse 15. But Jeshurun grew fat and kicked. You grew fat, you grew thick, you are obese. Then he forsook God who made him, and scornfully esteemed the rock of his salvation. Although God is their father in verse 18, Moses states that they have forgotten that he is the rock who begat them. Deuteronomy 32, verse 18. Of the rock who begot you, you are unmindful, and have forgotten the God who fathered you. Then Moses lays out the history of the relationship between God and the children of Israel in preparation for making the case against the children of Israel. He calls on them to remember the days of old when God established them. Deuteronomy 32, verse 7. Remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he will show you, your elders, and they will tell you. We're broadcasting this teaching as the Feast of Trumpets begins. The Feast of Trumpets is a call on God to remember his people and a call on God's people to turn and remember him. Leviticus 23:24. Speak to the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, on the first day of the month, you shall have a Sabbath rest, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. The children of Israel were and are to remember their history with God. They are to remember that they are his portion. Deuteronomy 32, verse 9. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the place of his inheritance. The place of God's inheritance is with the children of Jacob. Moses related that God chose Jacob when he was helpless and without resources. He hovered over Jacob, caring for him as an eagle protects its young. Deuteronomy 32, 10-12. He found him in a desert land and in the wasteland, a howling wilderness. He encircled him. He instructed him. He kept him as the apple of his eye. As an eagle stirs up its nest, hovers over its young, spreading out its wings and taking them up, carrying them on its wings. So the Lord alone led him, and there was no foreign god with him. In response, Jacob looked only to the Lord for his provision and protection. He acknowledged that the Lord was his God. Genesis 35, verse 3. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make an altar there to God, who answered me in the day of my distress and has been with me in the way which I have gone. Then skipping down to verses 9 and 10. Then God appeared to Jacob again when he came from Padan Aram and blessed him. And God said to him, your name is Jacob. Your name shall not be called Jacob any more, but Israel shall be your name. So he called his name Israel. God in turn blessed Jacob with produce from the field, including both crops and animal products. However, because of these blessings, the children of Israel have forgotten the rock of their salvation. They have forgotten that it is God who redeemed them from slavery in Egypt, and God who brought them into the promised land, and God who blessed them with the riches of the land. Now they began to bring in other gods and ascribe those gods the blessings that only God had given them. They began to worship those gods in the place of the one true God. Deuteronomy 32, verses 16-17. They provoked him to jealousy with foreign gods. With abominations they provoked him to anger. They sacrificed to demons, not to God, to gods they did not know, to new gods, new arrivals that your fathers did not fear. God then pulled away from Israel. He turned his face away and allowed them to experience the consequences of their actions. He gave them into the hands of their enemies, and he chose another people who were not really a people, to provoke them to jealousy. Deuteronomy 32, verse 21. They have provoked me to jealousy by what is not God. They have moved me to anger by their foolish idols. But I will provoke them to jealousy by those who are not a nation. I will move them to anger by a foolish nation. Paul says that we who believe in Yeshua as the Son of God and for our salvation are the people who are not a people. Romans 10, 19 through 21. But I say, did Israel not know? First Moses says, I will provoke you to jealousy by those who are not a nation. I will move you to anger by a foolish nation. But Isaiah is very bold and says, I was found by those who did not seek me. I was made manifest to those who did not ask for me. But to Israel, he says, all day long I have stretched out my hands to a disobedient and contrary people. Moses, like Paul, calls them a nation devoid of understanding. Moses laments in his song that they do not realize that God, their rock, would allow them to be sold back into slavery. Deuteronomy 32, 28 through 30. For they are a nation void of counsel, nor is any understanding in them. Oh, that they were wise, that they understood this, that they would consider their latter end. How could one chase 1,000 and two put 10,000 to flight, unless their rock had sold them, and the Lord had surrendered them? Moses emphasizes that this will not happen by the power of the gods of the other nations, because their rock has no power. It will be only because God allows them to triumph over the children of Israel. However, God is not happy when his people are harmed. He will avenge his people. Deuteronomy 32, verse 35. Vengeance is mine, and recompense. Their foot shall slip in due time. For the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things to come hasten upon them. God will turn and have compassion on his people. Solomon also spoke prophetically about this day when he dedicated the temple to the Lord. He asked that God would remember his people when they repented after they had sinned and the curses came on them as God had warned. God responded to Solomon's prayer, stating that he would hear his people when they turned back to him. 2 Chronicles 7, verse 14. If my people, who are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sins and heal their land. Moses continues by inviting the Gentiles, those whom God had provoked Israel to jealousy, to join with Israel. Look at Deuteronomy 32, verse 43. Rejoice, O Gentiles, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants and render vengeance to his adversaries. He will provide atonement for his land and his people. As we look back over the centuries, we see that so much of what Moses spoke in this song has happened. But none of this had happened at the time that Moses spoke it, and yet it is all written as if it already had. The entire Song of Moses contains God's words to the children of Israel about what would happen after they came into the land, after they had been blessed by God, and after they had turned away and rejected him. Although much of this has now happened, we have yet to see the final act. We have yet to see all Israel turn back to God and seek his face. We have yet to see God heal their land. And we have yet to see God avenge his people. However, God has already provided the atonement for his land and his people. Notice that it is God who provides the atonement. Man cannot do it. The writer of Hebrews tells us that without the shedding of blood, there is no remission or atonement. Hebrews 9, verse 22. And according to the law, almost all things are purified with blood, and without shedding of blood there is no remission. He goes on to say that Yeshua's blood is the blood that makes atonement for sins. Hebrews 9:24 through 26. For Christ has not entered the holy place made with hands, which are copies of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us, not that he should offer himself often, as the high priest enters the most holy place every year with blood of another. He then would have had to suffer often since the foundation of the world. But now, once at the end of the ages, he has appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. There will come a time, perhaps very soon, that God will gather his people once again at the entrance to the promised land with the heavens and earth as witnesses. Look at Ezekiel 20:34 through 38. I will bring you out from the peoples and gather you out of the countries where you are scattered, with a mighty hand, and with an outstretched arm, and with fury poured out. And I will bring you into the wilderness of the peoples, and I will plead my case with you face to face. Just as I pleaded my case with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt, so I will plead my case with you, says the Lord God. I will make you pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. I will purge the rebels from among you, and those who transgress against me. I will bring them out of the country where they dwell, but they shall not enter the land of Israel. Then you will know that I am the Lord. When God brings Israel back to the land, we will rejoice with Israel. Ezekiel says that the Gentiles will witness this return to God. Ezekiel 20, verse 41. I will accept you as a sweet aroma when I bring you out from the peoples and gather you out from the countries where you have been scattered, and I will be hallowed in you before the Gentiles. Then God will bring his vengeance on his enemies and avenge the blood of his servants. Revelation 19:1 and 2. After these things I heard a loud voice of a great multitude in heaven saying, Alleluia! Salvation and glory and honor and power belong to the Lord our God. For true and righteous are his judgments, because he has judged the great harlot who corrupted the earth with her fornication, and he has avenged on her the blood of his servants shed by her. As Moses stood before the congregation with the heavens and the earth as witnesses, he proclaimed God's entire plan. Moses proclaimed all that would happen to the children of Israel and how God would have compassion on his people. Moses pointed to Yeshua, both the one who would be their atonement and the one who would avenge their blood. The heavens and the earth are witnesses to this plan. God has known all along how Israel would act and how we will act. Through it all, he desires to have compassion on his people and bless his people. Thanks for watching today. I'm Dan Cathcart, and this is Shadows of the Messiah. Shalom, and be blessed.